I'm delighted to introduce the Reverend E.K. Daufin, PhD, 2024 Bell Hooks Legacy Award-winning author of the book On Fat and Faith, Ending Weight Stigma in Yourself, Your Sanctuary, and Society, is an intersectional fat, Black, feminist, educator, speaker, author, activist, artist, priestess, and poet. Born in working class Brooklyn, New York, and broadcasting now from the deep South, Central Alabama, lower middle class, she works on multiple platforms to end the patriarchy and manifest the partnership society golden era as soon as possible with as much grace and ease as she can. You can find her on Facebook, YouTube, Nextdoor, and ekdauphin.com. Welcome, EK.
Well, thank you. And same to you. Thanks. Am I on?
You are.
Away with the show. Thank
Yes.
you so much. Um, I want to start with a land and labor acknowledgement of I am in on the stolen lands from the Alabama people. That's so easy in Montgomery, Alabama for us. And the stolen labor of and breeding and monetizing of African peoples. We know, and I'm so thrilled with Shavis in stating up front that weight stigma is rooted in racism. And when you hear people say, oh, well, you just have to, at the end of a prayer, at the end of a session with women of the chalish, ministerial folks, meditation, the leader said, when I said, oh, I'm giving this seminar, welcome, the leader of the seminar said, and may we all, be at peace with our bodies and love our bodies. And I wanted to scream, no, it's not just that. Weight stigma, is within all of us, as is racism, right? As is patriarchy. And when we talk about, oh, well, you just need to love yourself, weight stigma lives in us because it's been hammered like on a nail again and again and again. And you have to be, just to keep your head flat as a nail, you have to be incredibly strong and powerful and maybe an old soul to resist. And so that's what action, when you are talking about weight stigma in yourself and externalizing it, what has been internalized and tries to get in every day. This is what we're talking about is resisting. Okay. And so I'm going to give some examples. They're not even the worst examples from my own life. And I know you have yours to share and so forth, the, trauma examples. And I'm not going to go hard on you, right? Because we have other things to do right now. Don't want to take you into that space. And bless us all. So weight stigma comes, the first, I did part of when I was in my PhD program, I was looking at beauty. And so I wanted to, first I was going to study humor and I found that very unfunny. That was no fun whatsoever. So I started studying beauty and especially, how it affects women's lives. And there's the idea of influencers in all communication and in media. The trouble is that influencers have already been influenced to have weight stigma undergirding everything, as well, racism there. So most of us get it. Ideas of beauty were that when a child, an infant, a child is supposed to be put on its mother's chest, after birth, ideally, and looks into the mother's eyes. That bonding begins, and some people, Barbara Fine Dyson, about pre and perinatal psychology, talks about the impressions and things that start to form us and affect us for our whole lives that begin in utero. So family. All that to say, fam is where the first weight stigma comes from. And what we find in our mediated society is that often we no longer get our concepts of beauty from that typically woman or person with a woman's body who gives us birth, and then on the on the chest you get that first eye contact, and that's starting to form she who nurtures you is beauty. That's been interrupted and interfered with by the media, and we'll talk more about that later. I think those of us who are, even those who aren't of higher weight, or we talk about, BMI stands for BS measurement instrument. However, at least it's, you know, and not however, and it also gives us a starting point. So almost all of us here know what it's like to get weight stigmatized by our family. You should also know, those who don't, that in Black families, colorism and internalized racism almost always begins with our family too. Those who don't get that are blessed. So, of course, your family will, my mother put me on a weight loss diet when I was 5 years old. And the whole idea of restriction and how, especially as a female, I shouldn't want to eat. And when money was tight, that the men ate first and the most, and there was a lot of anger and punishment if I was still hungry after I had eaten the portion that I was given. And the men were allowed second simply because, hey, men can weigh more, men can eat more, men can do what they want to do. That's the way it was in my family. And then the dreaded friends, the peer family that comes with weight stigma about, let's all go on a diet, or, and of course from the family too, just being repeated and reiterated with the friends, don't eat that, you shouldn't eat that, that's not, you're so fat, and oh, and maybe this is not a big thing anymore, but for folks, when they were getting married, especially women, and if they, have the money and all the rest to do that, but that you couldn't be a bridesmaid because you were too fat and you wouldn't look good. Your school, it's a good segue, instances of weight stigma, and that usually everyone agrees, right? You're bad because you are fatter than we want you to be. And so certainly, of course, the layers of oppression get worse and worse as we get as people get, higher and higher categories of weight. I think oh wow, I love following Reagan Chastain's presentation, in that her talking about, the weight cycling and how it makes you bigger and bigger. And most of us, not that there's anything wrong with that, as we say, right? But most of us know what it's like to that we were, if you look at old pictures of yourself when people were from your family, your friends, your school, and media, we'll get to that, are saying, you're too fat, what's wrong with you? Diet, exercise, starve yourself, you're bad, you're not intelligent, you don't deserve partnership or fun or pleasure or medical care. So weight stigma we also get from our doctors. When I was a child and we went to the it was a step up from the free clinics, and it was part of what but we had to wait for hours and hours when we went to go see a doctor. And of course, it wasn't always very clean. It wasn't very well lit. It was there were no accommodating seatings. There were no playrooms for the children. And when we got to see a doctor, it was, just any doctor who could see us as, any other health clinic, and never a history with a single doctor, that kind of choice. And so my first doctor was my pediatrician was a sweet, I say spicy to try to avoid ageism, and because spice is valued. So he was a spicy doctor, and I, he was the child of Holocaust survivors. And so he was happy to, pinch my ever so slightly chubby cheeks, actually, as I see. I just had cheeks, right? Not bones. And to, say that I was healthy and to be really happy about that. The different doctors that we did happen to see, or if we happened to see this one that I saw a few years, right? Once a year, as Reagan Chastain was saying. Um, and he was very happy with me. And then after after he retired or left, the doctor that we saw, once a year, most frequently, was an East Asian doctor, and nothing wrong with that, right? An East Asian doctor who was very thin himself and had come from a country where there was great starvation, and and didn't know the post-starvation regaining of weight as Mr. As the people did in my original pediatrician. So he said immediately, I think I was, guess I was, maybe I was 4 or 5, that, you need to, put this child on a diet. She's too fat. And that was in the way end of my life as a freer being. So weight stigma, if you have, it's like, oh, well, you just need to feel better about yourself. Well, it may be in yourself, but you didn't get there by yourself. The weight stigma is constantly reinforced, pressed into us, normalized, and you get beat up verbally, physically, sometimes spiritually, when you decide to do anything different. Um, and so, where does weight stigma live when we talk about in our sanctuary? Well, Bell Hooks, her lens of what spirituality is, says, I'm no Bible thumper, I'm a multi-religious minister. And you heard the word a priestess, a ceremonial leader and facilitator. The Bell Hooks talks about that spirituality is the comes to satisfy or attempt to satisfy the need to understand and respond to discrimination and suffering. So all humans have suffering. And when you have these layers of oppression, race, gender, size, social class, these are all additive, arithmetically adding, right? Not just, oh, I have one card and you have 2 cards. But arithmetically adding to the trial and the suffering. We also have spirituality in seeking love and connection. And so weight stigma lives in those structures, though, that we try to get spirituality. And even when I say structures, it doesn't have to be a church, a temple, a synagogue. It can be in the book, right? Spiritual books that when you title a book and what you have to name it and what the marketers will say or the publisher will allow, and the controversy of using the word fat, because what I wanted was people who had a notion of, as Marilyn Wan's book says, fat. So, people who had a notion of that, reclaiming, as we reclaimed black, right? Black used to be a curse word. Be ready to take off your earrings, throw down if someone called you black, or oh, don't they call your mama black? Woo! Fighting words. So we had to we're reclaiming the word fat. And so I wanted folks who had started to do some of the reclaiming, and also that it's not another freaking diet book, because those of you who explored that know that, many of the books, if it talks anything about weight, so-called spiritual books or religious books, that they'll talk about, how if you really loved your deity, Jesus, whichever you're talking about, if you really love God, if you were really doing right, just like your doctors, if you were really eating and exercising, as you say you are, then you would be thin. And that it just doesn't work like that. So these are in the whole idea of what is good, what is holy, what is right. It's in books. It's in our churches, temples, synagogues. If they're in ashrams that I have seen and been part of or had classes, they can be classes for, yoga and meditation, things that are seek that. Responding, giving you strength to respond to discrimination and suffering. Places that aren't necessarily religious or have a direct spiritual line, but all the new age stuff, and I've been very immersed in so much of that since childhood, as well as the patriarchal religions. Um, and so the whole idea of, body, mind, well, your mind should make you thin, right? Just as backing off of the whole that we can influence, right? Influence some things, but we can't control very much at all. And that's really scary. So a lot of people, they will give you that judgment. They'll reinforce weight stigma on you because especially if they are thin, have that thin privilege, it gives them the idea that, oh, things work for you the way they work for me. And I don't eat much, whereas the way I started, I developed my own kind of haze when I was, my mother put me on a weight loss diet since I was 5. And then, of course, I quote unquote did it to myself because what else was I supposed to do? I was this horrible thing that I had to control or nobody would love me. And what I didn't, well, that would have been scary too if I had realized then that the folks who didn't love me in that time in place or in that body, they just didn't love me, which I learned when I went on an initial, starvation, systematic dieting, and you know, did lose weight, but it was never. But then people were vicious in a different way, So weight stigma lives in your sanctuary. Some of the places that this, because you would think, right, that, oh, spirituality, that's above, that's outside the physical. It doesn't matter what you are on the outside, it's what you are on the inside. But those people, as we talked about in the first section, right, have already been immersed and enacting their weight stigma and banging it into you. So the whole, even in Wiccan circles, if you look at most Wiccan art or goddess-centered art, very thin goddesses. Only when a goddess is recent neo goddesses, right? Unless they're pregnant, right? And they may have some of my students at a historically Black university where I, made full professor, and they talked about, oh, well, Black culture. And a lot of white folks say, oh, well, Black culture, they like, fat women. There's no weight stigma in Black culture. That is such balderdash. And even if you look at, there's an old video for an old song that says, I like big butts. If you look at that video, there's only one even thick woman. And so when we say thick, that means that, maybe according to the, recent crazy BMIs, that person may be considered, higher weight technically, just as we have people in the fat liberation movement. If they're around, more normative sizes, like size, 12, 14, 16, even 18, people are like, well, you're not really fat. You don't know what it's like. And, but the whole idea that, in their mind, if not their body, right? What you are perceived as and where you go affects the weight stigma and what you are experiencing. So we find weight stigma in all these spiritual spaces, right? Even including those that are not supposed to be, patriarchal and controlling and male, thin, athletic kind of body, and that a woman is, fat and uncontrollable. And the only time she's holy is when she's pregnant. And then the big deal about losing the baby weight, quote unquote. So, and all these examples running in my mind about, for instance, Beyonce, also to continue that last thread about, people or women who are called, oh, they're fat and they're a sex symbol. They weren't talking about bodies like Lizzo. They were talking about bodies like Beyonce, who have disproportionately large breasts and buttocks, baby hips, right? Which are called sexual characteristics, but a thin, itty bitty waist. Even the goddesses of the you see in Vedic art, have proportionally huge breasts, impossibly Barbie little waists, and slightly plumper, well, buttocks, but width-wise, they're still very slim, right? And then the legs are supposed to be really slim. So Protestant work ethic, which goes past, that's part of especially North American culture, or anywhere that Christianity, missionaries, and so forth have had their way. Bishop Desmond Tutu said, when the colonizers came to our country, we had the land and they had the Bible. And then when the colonizers finally we got them to leave our country, they had the land, they owned the land, and we had the Bibles, which in and of themselves was not very useful. And of course, you know that those people had a religion of their own already, fully functional. Not everything was great about it in my notion, of today and what I stand for. But the patriarchal colonizing religions didn't either. So the notion of if you work hard enough, you can do anything. And that is certainly in the United States and pressed in New Age and so forth. And that's all part of the weight stigma undergirding. Because if you diet and exercise right, if you work hard enough, and some people even think if your mind is right, if you visualize thinness, you will be thin, versus the whole part of the divine Holy Mother, goddess, feminine, the divine feminine, is that yes, we are also body, and not trying to divorce ourselves from the body or self-flagellation, but that the body is holy in and of herself, and that the great earth experiment and task is to fully infuse spirit and matter. So, other notions that we have in patriarchal religions, such as fasting, because that makes you holy, and just don't eat, just choose, just do it, kind of idea. And then the whole idea of sin and, the idea of gluttony. And of course, we know that the largest mammals, right, that the larger the body is, proportionally less you eat less, right? They eat less. Whales eat very little compared to the size of their bodies, right? Whereas mice and, oh my gosh, hummingbirds, now you can say they're exercising all the time with their figure-8 wings, right? But the whole notion that if you're fat, you must be a glutton. If you're fat, you must be not exercising and not eating right, which is a whole nother complex eating disordered and disordered eating. I thank goddess for the term disordered eating, because most people don't know what that means, and they just hear eating disorder and they kind of understand a little bit. Though, of course, when someone sees anyone who is not bone thin, right, sickly thin, they think that, oh, you have an eating disorder. It must be, uh, obsessive eating. It must be, that you are just pigging out, eating gross quantities all the time. So that you are sinning by being and existing as a female of any size. And then, oh my gosh, fat people. So the intersection of fat and female, oh, just a sin walking. And remember that Black women tend to be the ones who have the highest body weight, and the highest multi-level discrimination, along with other levels of discrimination that we'll talk about in a moment. Also, the whole idea that Reagan Chastain made so beautifully about that the spiritually, it is your individual, there's original sin too, and it's individual is, it's your fault if you're anything bad. And thinking of bad, the patriarchal notion that fat is bad. And instead of that, there are so many systematic structures that undergird and create each situation. Also, the notion that Dee herself, I say, but that holiness itself, and as humans and human bodies in this whole material universe that we're in, that we see that our notion of what is deity is typically in human form, and that it is a thin, fearsome white man, or he's, sickly, thin because he's fasting and pure all the time. And those are all in quotation, folks. Please see and know the quotation marks. And that even in Vedic, cultures and other ideas of goddess, typically the goddess, the neo-goddess, neo-Wiccan art, certainly are almost always thin white women with long blonde hair. Oh, long story about my involvement in the UFO community. There are other names for it now, but you know what I'm talking about. That even there is the weight stigma, racism, and sexism. They used to be, well, they exist still in recordings, but many jokes from Black folks about in all these, in the space films that fat people, there were no fat people, right? Once in a while they have some Black folks, and yay, the Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, Star Trek's have a Black male captain, and he even, we were so happy that he had a Black female cohort, uh, but that they were all thin. And occasionally you find fat or bigger bodied men, almost all the time in science fiction, we're talking about now, right? That their bodies were also, they were bad guys if they were big men, usually. And of course, all the women were thin. And in Vedic art, you notice again the sexualized characteristics. We talked about that. So a body bod, and that they were somehow lower. There's a great book called When God Had a Wife, that is beautifully researched for those, who are vested or seek, strength in that. Um, that really shows how there used to be a balanced partnership society notion of deity, and that now, before, God had to lose his wife, and that the wife had to be demonized, versus seeing God as a fat, awesome woman, right? And as awesome as an awesome, and then awesome as, wow. So that's where weight stigma lives in our sanctuaries. And of course, weight stigma lives in our society, and not just social media, but you know how hard it is. I resist all the time, and it is hard. But just to live now, everyone wants you, to save money and build corporate profits for stockholders, not just so everyone could have a prosperous life and, have a good life and the fair exchange of goods and services, not that. So we're talking about capitalism, right? But there's unavoidable media immersion. It is almost impossible, even in remote areas now. There are some studies about a remote oceanic, that's a better word than Polynesian, whole other conversation, but an oceanic isolated community, that before they got television, right? Before they got television, that the fat bodies were appreciated and they were normal, the way we'd like to do that in now. But when they got television, oh my gosh, then the weight loss dieting started, and the weight cycling, and the discrimination and weight stigma, right? And remember that all the people from the first section about where weight stigma comes from, internalized, or, internal weight stigma comes from all those groups that are influencing us. They are all media immersed also. And we're only going further down that line. So in my view, weight stigma is rooted in patriarchy. Bell Hooks talks about three prongs: capitalism, patriarchy, and racism. Uh, uh, and so what we like to see is, talk about all those being included in patriarchy, that it's not just sexism or male idealization that is or mask, and male presenting. And when I talk about weight stigma, so much depends upon how people perceive you. You may, it's a balance, right, of influence, identity, but the way you get your identity or maintain it is through the way other people treat you and how other people perceive you. This is not in, I have to put it in a linear order in a slide, right? But it's not in a linear order. These are all interfluencing, right? So capitalism, and with that idea, we talk about it's money over planet. One thing I liked in An Inconvenient Truth by, I guess he's still called Vice President, right? Al Gore. That documentary was one of the few documentaries that won uh, one of the awards, Oscar. Is usually a documentary doesn't win that kind of award. Anyway, money over planet and people. So we don't have plan B, right? We don't have planet B or plan B, and that money over people, money over entities and beings, right, of life. And it's like if we don't save the planet, we ain't going nowhere. Lots of money, what's it going to matter, right? So that's what capitalism is. And weight stigma is rooted in that, because we have to be able to sell you, right? It's not about having everybody having their own idea of, having a nice living, being able to survive and thrive, and the equal exchange of services. I'm just trying to make that it's not just about living well and success, but that we need to exploit everything for more money, more money, more money, right? That we have to make you hate your body so that you will buy all these things to make you look slim, right? To make you look or to try to get slim. When One of the things when beloved Reagan Chastain was saying in her presentation about that certain diet plans are economically efficient. Well, this is the best cost. They don't mean the best cost like keeping you healthiest, alive and thriving longest. What they mean is that we can sell more and it'll cost us less. It doesn't matter about its efficacy. That's what capitalism is, and weight stigma is rooted in that. Weight stigma is, rooted and began in racism, which is also anti-blackness. BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color. So that you understand that colorism, which is a result of capitalism, colonialism, oppression, horrificness. I also, I found some people yesterday who were unable to give a labor acknowledgement to the American enslavement and breeding industry. There's a great book, huge, thick, physical paper book that is written by a white couple of researchers who really laid it down and taught me so much. And it's called The American Slavery and Breeding Industry, to understand the way that Africans and African Americans were monetized, literally, and the horrific, that was about capitalism and color. And that color was something you could see from a distance. You notice that in the Jewish Holocaust, because enslavement and breeding industry was the Black or African Holocaust. In the Jewish Holocaust, Jews were made to wear those armbands so that they could be discriminated against horrifically, right, from a distance. And the punishment was so severe if you were Jewish and you were not wearing that armband. And so we want to be able to discriminate from a distance. And so that's why Blackness was one of the things that was used for that. I also urge people, I talk about using the word spicy versus aged or old. I also urge people to when you use Black, make sure you mean the color, or make sure you mean the people, not evil. not uh, dastardly, not depressive. Okay, don't use black in those ways. In the Malcolm X's uh, autobiography, and you see a dramatic, beautiful visualization of it. Spike Lee does in his film Malcolm X. That Malcolm X discovered as he was learning when he was imprisoned, he was learned that all the words for black were evil, horrible things. And then all the words for white, purity, beauty, fairness, right? Those were all good. So please, when you use black, use it for people of African descent, use it for the color black, use it for, yeah, the color black, like not, the black of night means that, oh, it was really dark and it was a new moon, right? Not that, oh, fearsome. Use the word fearsome, use the word evil, call a spade, okay? And sexism is part of weight stigma, that women are supposed to be smaller, lighter, and so forth. One of the ways that sexism, and we're getting to misogynoir, is that misogynoir is the intersection of Black and female. And so in the intersection of Black and female, that is all that is bad and stigmatizing about being female, not the few benefits or good things, right? Not most of them, not, and all the bad things about being stigmatized and treated and identified as Black, and you put them together and they're worse. And there's a great landmark beginning Black feminist text anthology called All the Women Were White, all the men were Black, but some of us are brave. And that's a great notion. And that's what I remind people of and think of when I think of misogynoir. That so Black women, and that's why I urge people also, please, in the language we use, that we say, if it's something that affects white women and people of color, let's just say white women and people of color, or women of all colors, and men of color, okay? Not women and Black people, or women and people of color, or women and Latinos, because there's some studies done that show that when people say women, people think white women. When people say Black, they think of Black men. Do you know that so many Black women too, proportionally, as far as women and police interaction, that so many Black women are killed, unarmed Black women are killed by police. In fact, Black women who are killed by police are the least likely group to have any weapons or to have been committing any crime. Just as we saw in the last killing, there is a project called Say Her Name. It is from the African American Policy Forum, run by Kimberly Crenshaw, who gave us the term intersectionality, who created it to talk about the layers of unearned privilege. And so I think I've addressed then about all the intersectionality of these layers here, and that weight stigma is rooted in that patriarchy. So, having identified all the ways that weight stigma is, some of the ways that weight stigma is present in ourselves, and created in ourselves, in our sanctuary, in our so-called holy places of, getting away from, or a safe place amongst all the discrimination, as Shiloh George was talking about yesterday in this wonderful conference, that and in our society, and media, the moderator of weight stigma and all the ills, and not so much all the good. Public media and all the wonderful things that media on all levels can do is not the one that is the most capitalistically, that doesn't make the most money, the more money for people. So let's talk about 5 ways that you can stop weight stigma as an ally, especially, or and as a person who is not at the moment being the one who is being harassed. Most of these, all of them work for in person. They also work online because so much of our lives, right, especially since the pandemic and the ongoing endemic, is media, as is our wonderful connection here today. I call them Dr. D's 5 Ds of bystander weight stigma intervention. And because I love all that alliteration. And it is started by something called bystander intervention. It's developed by the holla back, resist, right? Do something in part, and it was developed in partnership between Hollaback and the Green Dot Bystander Intervention Program. There are 5 ways: direct, distract, delegate, delay, document. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and you can ask me some questions about more of these, because you notice I'm, even being from New York, I'm talking a little bit more fast now to try to be on time. Direct. If you see someone being stigmatized, right? Weight stigmatized and intersectionally stigmatized. One of the things about weight stigma means that as much as, whatever you get as a with your levels of privilege, remember that it's even worse. Hard to imagine sometimes, I know. It's even worse for someone who is even more oppressed, right? Who has one more perceived identity, right? That is also oppressed. So you see it, if you are safe to do so, and remember, you got to stick your neck out a little bit, because there's going to be there may be flyback, right? There's definitely probably going to be backlash. And some of these were designed to be as safe as possible for the intervener. And depending on how many oppressed identities you have as the intervener, uh, you know, just get off it. Just help. I believe there are some people who say, and I am, so many of my wonderful friends from California who, and I'm talking about white friends, and these are white friends who are fat allies and perceived fat lib folks themselves, who have some sensitivity about racism. Somebody's out there teaching, oh, if it's, well, I know the behavior they're trying to prevent, of the whole notion of white savior and, oh, I'll come to save the day. Don't try to save the day, try to support, right? And so the whole idea of, as a privileged person, whatever layer of privilege you have in the group, to step back and listen and pay attention. And also listen to, right? Some of the things you shouldn't do is to press back against someone who is trying to intervene in intersectional weight stigma and say, well, I know something that's different. Well, I've done such and such. When I was racially harassed out of Durango, Colorado, so many people said, for instance, like it was like the 1940s and 50s. I saw Eyes on the Prize, and I'm like, yes, decades after that had happened. And I'm like, yes, that's what I'm experiencing now. Only there's, 5 people spitting at me instead of 50. That the whole idea of, I went to a restaurant, I was not served. I asked to be served, and the person just turned around and walked away from me. And several white people said to me, that's not true. I'm served in there all the time. It's like, that's the point. Okay. If it's safe, you see some discrimination, weight stigma, harassment going on, I want you to, if it's safe to do so for you and take some risks, especially privileged folks, take some risks, say something short and direct, like, that's a pretty nasty thing to say about higher weight people. Again, only use fat among people who are fat lib, people who identify like that, or that it's something, and it depends, right, about whose mouth it comes out of and how you say it. So you want to say something short, like, that was a nasty thing to say about a person of size. That sounds really weight stigmatizing. Okay, so it's direct. Second one is to distract. So you give a cold shoulder to the stigmatizer and you engage the target. In this way, you might literally spill your tea, right? Or coffee, spill the tea, tell the truth, out it. Um, and that's the words I'm playing on there. So you might purposely spill your coffee. Oh, right. When the spy films cause a distraction, or well, since COVID and in the endemic, you might not want to just start coughing a lot, right? That might that might cause a different result, but at least if they get away from you, maybe they'll stop harassing the higher weight person or enacting their weight stigma. So you engage the target. You just start something. Hey, I have this thing about colors, whole nother energy, magic, spirit, path. So I'll say, hey, that's a gorgeous color you have on. Is that your favorite color? Just out of the blue, right? That's one way. I suggest you use several of these. Another, when appropriate. Another one is to delegate. So that means to get help in the stigmatizing. If something, for instance, especially good when it's not safe for you to intervene directly or to distract. Also in the distraction part, you want to physically, if you can, right? And even visually on the screen, if this is an online matter, you want to get in between and just draw the attention elsewhere. So when you delegate, you get help. Beware of calling the police, especially on Black people. We have to do it sometimes, or even when the person who's being harassed is Black, because often when police show up, we die, right? Or we get taken to jail. Our life becomes irreparably disrupted. But if there's a security guard, if there's a teacher, oh, we're supposed to do everything. I know, I'm a teacher. But to call for help, someone who can help, and to call for help. Beware, be careful, make sure the stakes are big enough for if it's for the popo. To delay. So that means that afterwards, after the harassment has gone, this is one of the least, but oh, so much better than nothing that I experience, is that afterwards you say to the person privately, oh my God, that was horrible. I'm so sad that happened to you. For instance, different situation, but the behavior of delaying, at least I called yesterday to my senator, in DC, and said, I want you to avoid. I don't want any national law that prevents abortion. And I talked about for people who are, even when they have a sexual assault or an incest, which is sexual assault, uh, some of the worst kind, but worse and worse, who knows? Well, I guess someone does know. But anyway, to validate afterwards. So I said, hey, I am an ancestral assault survivor, and to be able to prove that is almost impossible, and it takes so long that the person may often be taken beyond a claim. So let it be between a woman, I said her God versus her goddess, her deity, and her doctor. And she said, normally the folks in the office are very not very nice to me or happy to hear from me. And she said, with what felt like compassion and sincerity in her voice, she said, I'm so sorry that happened to you, and I will get the information to the senator. What they're going to do with it, I don't know, but resist, as Derek Bell said, better to resist, to die going down, right, than to just go down. And then document. Is the target help first, right? Is someone intervening? Has someone, tried to directly intervene? Has someone tried to distract folks? Is help on the way? If so, then are you safe enough to? And then, of course, record on your phone, audio, video taping. One of the reasons, people are like, oh, the escalating violence against Black folks. This stuff has always been happening since, the police force was created as a result of the slave catchers, right, and the vigilante groups of enslavement and enforcing racist violence against Black people. And so remember that you want to record, and then later ask the target. Don't just put it online, especially, if the person is killed, go ahead, put it online. That's the way we get that some of the violence against Black men, especially because the police violence against Black women is less often recorded. And remember, it's just such a small percentage that is actually recorded and then, of course, goes viral, and at least gets the 15 minutes of fame. And so if it's not that, it's some other kind of harassment, or you have screen shot the exchange, or you have written up your notes ask the target what they want you to do with that document, and give them a copy. Don't just post it online about, oh, this horrible thing happened, without asking them, unless, of course, they've been killed, and then go ahead. So I'm going to take some questions now. I will have roughly 8 minutes, I suppose, for questions. I had planned on 15, but forgiveness, Shanice. I'm trying to do what's right. So my thanks. My
You are
recommendation.
okay. You are
Thank you.
okay.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah. So I have one question so far. What are some appropriate interventions when someone expresses internalized weight stigma without invalidating their feelings? In other words, they are saying harmful things about their own weight and body.
That is a great question. And this often goes for ageism, it goes for racism, it goes for all those intersections. What I say is that if they are saying it about, they're saying it about themselves, but I am also in that group. For instance, in online forums, there is a very evil, by all objective and goddess and holy objection, visualization, understanding, observation, a former president who is also very big bodied and a higher weight. And that person insults people of higher weights also. But I always tell, that so often the social critics and the comedians who we go to get some relief from the terrible tension and oppression and terror of losing democracy. I say, there's so much low-hanging fruit for this evil person. Talk about that. Don't talk about their weight, because there's so many, innocent people, good people, humans, people who are of higher weight. So if it is part of one of my, I'm so blessed with so many oppressed identities, both presenting and visual and unseen, that I would say if it's part about your identity. So fat friend is saying it about, fat people. I intervene, right? My feelings, our feelings, right, are just as important, and they're hurting themselves spiritually. They have autonomy. And as I used to tell my students all the time, I'm not the thought police. Think what you want, but I am the say police in my classroom, and in my, like, around me. Like, if you got to do that mess, don't do it around me. So, I have a wonderful sovereign life. Not a lot of company, but I always say, because I don't want a whole lot of company, right? I just want those of my own kind, like minds, like hearts. I long for their company. And so intervene is what I'm saying, if it is one of your identities. Now, if you are an ally, for instance, although queer, according to Bell Hooks, she was identified as queer, not gay. And so many of my friends who are queer and gay have been saying, no, EK, you're queer, you're queer. And I was like, no, I don't, I'm an ally. And so, but the way Bell Hooks described, she said she was gay, not queer, is that queer is in who you are and your sense of, justice and being makes it difficult to be loved and to find love in the world as it is. So if you are an ally and they are not talking about, your queerness in, maybe you are straight and cis, and someone is dissing LGBTQA folks, then, oh, I guess I should take the Q out since I just explained that. But anyway, the other letters there that you should say, I would imagine that that would be that even that you're speaking that maybe you want to say that just for yourself and not for all fat people, because I imagine that would be very hurtful to a lot of fat people. And realize in the intervention, as I have very recently experienced, when you intervene, you are likely to get some BS, some put down, some verbal beat down. And remember how much luckier you are that it's just right. It's a verbal beatdown versus a physical beatdown. I always think of my ancestors, because so also, folks, another thing about language, don't ever say that you're a slave. You might be an indentured servant if you're working, you're right, especially at a black job, a bad job, and you are, working paycheck to paycheck and you're treated badly, right? You might be an indentured servant, working to live, not living to work, but you are not enslaved and bred and monetized, in that way. So, maybe another question has come, or maybe I'll finish reading the slide, but intervene, even if it's someone talking about themselves. And yes, they have sovereignty, but oh, and also what I say sometimes, if I've already tried all the nice and high level interventions, I say, keep my name, keep my body out of your mouth. Keep judgments about my age out of your mouth. Okay. Talk about yourself and not me. And remember, I used to be, I got in trouble in first grade for throwing up in my handkerchief instead of going to the bathroom because I was afraid to, to disrupt the class by raising my hand and saying I had to go to the bathroom to throw up. And so uh, I didn't used to be this way. Horrors and trials have given me. So don't think, oh, that's a sassy, fat black woman. Yeah, she can do that because they always angry black women, right? I had to learn to do this and I still pay for it every day. Okay, that's my answer.
I love it. So we're gonna end, Carol made a comment, yes, make your voice heard wherever and whenever possible. I love these 5 Ds. One person may be a drop in the ocean, but lots of drops can make a wave. Let's tsunami all this BS. Thank you, Dr. EK. I think that's a lovely way to
Tsunami.
end. Thank you so much, EK, for being here and sharing your wisdom and your grace. And thank you, everyone.
Bye bye. Blessed be.